This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, this show, a big part of what this show does, a big part of our mission is to get to the bottom of stories, or at least hash things out and talk things through. And today's episode will be an example of that. We're about to check in with two veteran professional foresters. Between the two of them, more than 80 years of experience in Western Canada, working in the logging industry, and they made a bit of a name for themselves nationally. Unfortunately, this July, just about 3 months ago, when the township of Jasper met a wildfire that obviously inflicted devastating damage. Now, here's the thing. These two foresters that we're going to talk to, Ken Hodges, Emile, actually wrote letters almost 7 years before that fire to the then Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the federal government, warning of such a disaster. They said that if certain steps weren't taken, that a wildfire, exactly like what we saw in July of 2024, may and ultimately would happen. One of them, Ken Hodges, appeared before a parliamentary hearing a week ago, and we're grateful that they're making time to talk to us today. Now, what you're about to hear today is going to be opinions, and they're going to back those up based on their years of experience and their observations. All of this, of course, part of a bigger conversation as the federal government, Alberta's provincial government, Parks Canada, and Canadians try to make sense of what happened in Jasper, why, and how to avert similar disasters in other areas of the country, including our other beloved national parks. This episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. Of course, you know that's Relo at relo.ca, where better real estate training starts. If you've had enough with the job you're working at right now, if you're sick of cubicle life, if you'd love to really help people either buy or sell that perfect property, and if you don't mind the idea of unlimited earning potential, you're going to want to start your real estate career at Relo. Why? Because they have high exam pass rates. They've got flexible online learning. It works with your schedule, guaranteed industry-leading instructors, and their involvement doesn't stop the minute you've passed your test and got licensed to practice real estate. They're going to make sure you're kicking off that journey on the right foot and getting started in a way that will assure your best chance at success. You can check out what's new at Relo online. They've just launched weekly live exam prep sessions. They call them house calls. And don't forget, if you're signing up for the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle or the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle, the promo code Ryan100, all one word, Ryan100, will knock $100 off each of those when you get started today at relo.ca. As mentioned, between the two of them, Emile and Ken Hodges have more than 8 decades of experience working in Western Canada's forests, and we're grateful that they've made time to join us on this morning's episode of Real Talk. Ken, it was a week ago today that you were appearing in front of a parliamentary hearing that was endeavoring to find out why the Jasper wildfire started and how the federal government addressed that disaster. Did you have a certain sense of I told you so as you were on your way to Ottawa?
I don't know about I told you so, but I guess more frustrated that they didn't do anything to get things done. And we've talked about a lot of, there's questions that came out. Do you think that they could have done more? The answer is yes. They did say that they did the stuff that we recommended, but that was only the start of things. If the fire did occur in 2018, it was to protect the infrastructure. As they moved into 2019, they could have done a significant amount of, I guess, logging, but there's a lot of questions around whether they could or they could not, particularly around their policies or UNESCO, because it is a UNESCO heritage site. So at the meeting, there was a lot of, I guess, politics. It does play a game as part of the equation when you're in those committees. But it was very interesting to listen to the various speakers as well, particularly from various meetings that were carried out prior to my attendance. And we had Canadian Forest Service researcher around the fire. He did some speaking, and we also had I believe, a fire chief speak, and it was really interesting to hear them and hear their perspectives on what their impact was, or how they were people were hesitant to allow them to get in.
Yeah, we on the folks can check out our July 30th episode. We titled that "The Jasper Wildfire Explained," and in that episode, we had a chance to speak with a fire chief that was deployed with his crew out of the Metro Edmonton region, out of Spruce Grove, in fact, and they were ones that were tasked with protecting some of Jasper's water supply, saving the main lodge at the Jasper Park Lodge. We talked to Dr. Mike Flanagan, a wildfire scientist, who gave us his take on this, but we've not yet had a chance to talk to operational foresters. And obviously, the two of you are going to have your own unique perspectives on this. I want to make clear you're not researchers, you're not scientists, but you got a ton of experience on the forest floor, so to speak. Emile, you co-signed these letters that were written in late 2017 to then Minister Catherine McKenna. Talk to us a little bit about your experience in the forest and what prompted you and your colleague Ken to reach out unprompted in 2017 with a warning about these fires.
Well, Ken and I wrote the letters together. We did a lot of time going through it, but the background that I have started in the East Kootenays in the Rockies, right beside Kootenay National Park. That was my backyard: Kootenay, Banff, Jasper, Yoho, Lake Louise. And I was learning at a tech school after 5 years of working on the coast. In the forest industry, I was learning about the pine beetle, and turns out the instructor that I had at BCIT, he developed the survey methodologies, and I just started exploring and learning a lot from there. I learned what the BC government's perspective was on pine beetle, which was an interesting perspective. It was supposed to be the battle of the pine beetles. Turned out we could actually work with the beetles and learn a lot more. So all of that information and meetings with the Parks Canada planning staff going back to 1981, and then they went quiet for a while, and then we worked in Kootenay Park. When Parks Canada came out, they told us the pine beetle doesn't exist in any national park in Alberta. It doesn't exist in Alberta. And if BC didn't keep it out of Alberta, we'd be in trouble. I've learned over the years that that's a very, very small, narrow perspective. So that background and 25 years dealing with pine beetle hands-on every day, plus meeting up with Ken in Prince George in 2003 after the government closed the office in Invermere, we started working together more intensively on other areas of forestry. Jasper was kind of a common backyard for us, so everything as well as forestry. So we just kind of grew a pretty good friendship and combined a lot of knowledge on what was happening in our forest and Alberta's forests.
I want to read from a letter that the two of you co-signed November 3rd of 2017. Johnny, you can show it if you like. It's on my screen right now. In part, you write, the devastating fires that recently occurred in Fort McMurray, Waterton National Park, Central BC, Southern Alberta, paint a picture of things to come. Considering climate change and subsequent mountain pine beetle impacts, policies need to change for public safety, and policy change should consider non-fire activities. We are uncertain of your policies, you write, in managing natural events like insect outbreaks that cover the landscape with dead trees. These dead trees provide conditions favorable for catastrophic fires, which will destroy anything in its path. You say, in this case, public safety and community infrastructures are in the crosshairs for this natural event because of terrain and prevailing winds. You say, in order to understand your position on this potential destructive landscape events, we would appreciate your position or policy regarding this situation. 24 days later, just over 3 weeks later, you received a letter back from the then Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the Honourable Catherine McKenna, who wrote, Parks Canada is taking this matter seriously and has implemented the Jasper National Park Mountain Pine Beetle Management Plan over 2 seasons to address this issue. They say this science-based plan is part of an ongoing collaborative effort between Parks Canada, the Canadian Forest Service, and the government of Alberta. They say we have several management actions focused on addressing the safety of both visitors and the municipality of Jasper residents, while also meeting the agency's mandate to maintain and restore ecological integrity and manage the spread of the mountain pine beetle. She writes about the three main components of the plan: application of prescribed fire, removal of trees where prescribed fire is not feasible, and work with the municipality of Jasper to facilitate community protection. And she talks to you about a prescribed fire in spring of 2017 near the east gate of Jasper National Park. Was that sufficient for you, Ken, at the time to assuage your concerns or your fears about how this park was being managed or not managed in your estimation?
When I read the letter, no, it was not. The fire that they talked about, the prescribed fire, was at the East Gate. That's 72 kilometers away from the town of Jasper. You know, it's nice to say we've done burns, we've done this, we've done that, but how does it actually work towards protecting the community? That's the center of all of this. As far as the beetle program, it was almost, in fact, it was too little, too late. The beetles had gone to a level of you just couldn't control them because the lack of cold winters. They had good survival. The food was there, the weather was there, everything lined up for their explosive presence, going from endemic, which they are normally within the stands and within the forest, to epidemic. And we saw that in Prince George and throughout BC. And here we have it in Jasper. And it's nice that they put an effort into it, but it really wasn't enough. And I think Emile would have a better understanding around the mountain pine beetle than I would.
Yeah, Emile, I'm curious to hear this because when we talked to Dr. Mike Flanagan, who I think is Canada's preeminent wildfire scientist, he explained to us why he believes that the mountain pine beetle did not play a role in this wildfire. People can check out that episode on July 30th. We'll link to it in the show notes. I mean, he's Canada's preeminent wildfire scientist. Why do you believe differently? Take us into it.
Well, I'm not an expert in everything. I'm just dive into everything. Experts tend to be focused on their area of expertise. As foresters, we have to take in and understand everything that the experts offer and hands-on apply it to the ground. And if we see that it doesn't work, then we need to adapt their expertise to fit what's actually in reality. Forests tend to have their own way of doing things, and beetles don't read the research that these experts provide. So I dove into the research with experts, University of Calgary, Simon Fraser, Texas A&M, a lot of places, foresters from the United States, plus our own being out in the bush every day. And each logging block that we cut, we were able to pheromone bait, learn about management. In addition to the pine beetle activity, I worked on fires up to 19,000 hectares. Ken, we worked on fires a lot. We were trained dealing with that. I also have a background in search and rescue, and so I was able to really look at the fires, the pine beetles, the social and economic impacts, and the impacts from taking only narrow expert advice and not applying it to the whole landscape.
So what is it about the pine beetle that, I mean, treat me like the civilian that I am. What is it about the pine beetle that you think factors in so heavily to these fires? Just the fact that they're destroying large swaths of forest and leaving dry tinder freestanding, waiting for lightning to strike? Is that it?
Well, some of the information I learned hands-on goes back 4,000 years to research in Kootenay National Park, 3,500 years in Jasper National Park, that parks actually permitted in 2015, but didn't use the information in their 2016 pine beetle plan. We know the pine beetle's biology and history. We know pretty much where it comes from. We know a lot of the DNA and biology. Pine beetle repeats its fire cycle every 80 to 120, 135 years. This Jasper fire was 134 years after the last fire in the 1890s, which, based on some of the old fur traders and the explorers, was tied into pine beetle. And based on a lot of research into pine beetle, I spent 25 years doing that every day, and I built up a knowledge based on that's far greater than most people can appreciate, because that's not their area of interest. So ignoring what the pine beetles have done historically and saying that they're not contributing to fires, that's missing the whole forest ecosystem and ecological integrity that the forest actually can teach us about.
I'm curious to get both of your take. Like, you are boots on the ground, right? Like, you guys were the guys holding the saws. Like, you guys have worked in professional forestry for 4 decades plus, each of you. Alberta Girl's watching us this morning on YouTube in our live chat, says the pine beetle's been an issue since the 1980s. There's 40 years of mismanagement of forests because nobody wants to see logging. They prefer fire. Ken, how did you see forests change or evolve over the past number of decades? And maybe we can dig into logging. You talked about how UNESCO has certain standards for logging in those protected heritage sites that maybe didn't apply here. What's your take on that?
Well, first off, the beetle has been around for forever, it seems, but they're endemic and then they go into epidemic levels. The beetle itself, what we've done in Prince George is we couldn't manage it. So what we have to do is follow up behind it and utilize the wood. It has depending on the ecosystem, anywhere from 2 years to 7 years, maybe even longer, before major checking, and that occurs on in the tree itself. Until then, you can utilize that wood and certainly get stumpage. Now, with UNESCO, I'm not an expert on this, it's just what I've been reading lately. There was an article I was reading in some of the standards, and they don't encourage, in fact, I've heard that they have stopped any logging in UNESCO heritage sites. And I think they're trying to keep what they're initially were trying to get. However, they've got to remember that forests don't stop growing. They don't stop changing. Fires play a part of it. Insects play a part of it. And it does change. So it's not going to be a sea of green, which is so picturesque. You're going to see natural occurrences such as fires. Banff, Jasper, Parks Canada have done an excellent job at fighting fires. They've kept it down to everything below 2 hectares in size. And when you start doing that, the trees start getting old, they start breaking down, you start building fuel. Next thing you know, fire occurs, and it causes more damage than if you allowed it to occur naturally throughout the stages of a stand. Because there are sites I'm aware of that the fires were so intense that they sterilized the soils. And when you get that, you set it back millenniums, not just decades, but millenniums. So really, if we're allowed to allow stands to burn, say, at 40 years of age instead of 140, then you get a less intense fire than you would otherwise. So, and some of the ways to manage the fire and landscape is through logging. And even though UNESCO says, well, you shouldn't do that, but in Jasper, if they had done some part of logging, it would have probably saved the town.
So I mean, the word on the street, when you talk to the average Jasper citizen, I certainly don't speak for them, and I'm not saying everybody holds this position, but you talk to people that live there, and a lot of them will say, we've been bracing for this for a long time, because I think people looked around and saw that landscape, which in my mind, it's the most stunning spot in Canada, but I think that comes with some risk as well. I mean, the forest cover is absolutely beautiful. I mean, that's part of the reason why people come from all over the world to visit Jasper, but I think that folks that live there, folks in the know, always kind of had it in the back of their mind that something like this could and probably would happen. I can't imagine what tourists, what visitors to the town might think if they looked up near some of these incredible vistas and saw massive swaths of logging activity, right? It's sort of something that might be hard for the average human to process or to accept. But is that one of the solutions that the two of you would have been satisfied with when you were, or after you were writing these letters in 2017? Like, Emile, would that have been a step where you said, okay, this is a move in the right direction? Is that what you were calling for, essentially?
Not quite to that scale, but selective harvesting, something called beetle proofing, was actually figured out in the 1920s and 30s in California when they had camps where people were making $2.50 a day falling and burning lodgepole pine. This lodgepole pine wasn't considered a valuable harvested species. It was a weed species. So we learned the long way and the hard way that you can do selection harvesting in some sites depending on the ecosystem and the terrain. So you don't have to deal with every place these massive clear cuts. And we had the technology, the resources. We did glading, high elevation spruce balsam stands using highly logging systems, very unique systems from Europe, so that we could partially harvest stands so that they would fit in better to an ecologically more, well, a socially more acceptable, here's what the forests are, because I mean, we were all told Smokey the Bear was our friend and fires were bad. And Smokey the Bear was a good friend, but fires are good and they're needed. So there's a process of trying to help people understand and learn. And that's a long process. It's not short. Something Parks Canada could have done with our technology and with the knowledge that we've gained on the equipment and resources. We don't have to do massive clear cuts everywhere. Some stands, yes, because of the pines ecosystem. And as for the forest girl, she's correct. In Alberta, it was in the 80s, pine beetle came back. But in BC, it was 1972. And it started hammering the Okanagan areas 1975, 77. So much so that logging companies were clear cutting around tree farm licenses, saying that we're going to stop the pine beetle for spreading, but they forgot a really important thing, and that's the pine beetle flies. And it can fly 1.5 miles on its own, or it can fly from Vernon to Cypress Hills in Saskatchewan through the Rockies. So we've got to adjust our forest management to fit the ecosystem, fit the site, partial harvesting, some clear cut, some burning. But that requires a social engineering perspective that starts to appreciate the forests and gets away from this illusion that it's just all trees everywhere. Because in the 1890s, 1904, 1906, the photos of Jasper show how sparsely forested it was and how open it was. And with climate change, we know what's happening. We've had 134 years to learn this, and politicians haven't got it figured out. So let the foresters come in and do some work to respectfully work in the park and with the forest structure.
Okay, we're talking to Ken Hodges, Emile Bejan. If you're just tuning in on the Mixlr live streaming audio app presented by California Closets, Tracy is in our live chat asking the, $4 billion question. Is Banff at the same risk? That's where we're going to go. We'll talk about the public's appetite for firefighting, the smart way to go. We're talking to two retired professional foresters. One of them, Ken Hodges, just off a trip to Ottawa, appearing before a parliamentary hearing on the Jasper wildfire. Speaking of Jasper and those that are getting their lives back, our friends at Complete Care Restoration are out there, like literally as we speak, working on demolition, cleanup, repairing smoke damage, helping restore properties and rebuild peace of mind. That's rebuilding peace of mind is what they've been doing for more than a quarter century. As a matter of fact, in Sharon, we see you, we hear you in our live chat talking about northern communities, in particular First Nations, that have been absolutely devastated by wildfire. I want to let you know that Complete Care is up there as well in a number of those different communities, getting those houses back, the community infrastructure back. We've worked with them in past, not on disaster, but they built our studio, and this is a team that treats every project like it's their own. If disaster strikes in your neck of the woods or you need that property restored, your big investment, remember the name Complete Care Restoration. Kubi Renewable Energy is hiring right now, and in particular, they're looking for installers. They're looking for seasoned veterans, those of you that have your ticket, as well as, in addition to the journey persons, apprentices that would love to work for Canada's fastest growing solar company. You're going to go, Jasper, what are you talking about? It's like the middle of October. They're putting people up on the roofs in the middle of October. No, they're not, but they never stop hiring because they're scaling up this company at a pace you would find hard to believe. The training happens, they get you to work, and then come spring, they've got you back out there in the field. If you're looking for work, you're unemployed, underemployed, or you're just looking for new inspiration, check out the careers link at kubienergy.ca. And our friends at Friesen Brothers, we know that they're feeding a lot of those workers that are out there in Jasper and Hinton out of their beautiful Hinton location. Friesen Brothers, 17 different family-owned locations across the province of Alberta. We want to remind you about their new Order Ahead app. They've just launched this for online orders. You can conveniently order Friesen Brothers party trays or your Alberta beef roundup from that app and pick them up at any Friesen Brothers store. You can learn more on their website, and you can also always order online at order.friesen.com. Let's get right to Tracy's question as we are hanging out. We're with Emile and Ken Hodges, two retired professional foresters, 80 years of experience. Tracy wonders, is Banff at the same risk? And we could probably pick and choose any national park. We could pick and choose any provincial park. Let's just talk about communities that are surrounded by these magnificent Canadian mountain forests. What's the conversation that we need to be having about these areas, gentlemen?
If you want to take the forest structure from Lake Louise through Sunshine Ski Hill into Banff and out to Canmore, down through the Kananaskis, you're dealing with huge, massive areas of fire-started lodgepole pine forests. That's what lodgepole pine does. They're a pioneer species. Banff did do some work in the Brewster Creek Sunshine area, removing some beetle-killed trees. They've done a little bit of removal of some dangerous trees in their campsites. Canmore, Alberta Forest Service, has done a little bit of pine beetle removing in some of the areas Ken and I have walked with. We've spoken a little bit with Alberta Forest staff. Is Banff and Jasper in the sites? Yes. Most definitely, they're part of this 80 to 134 year pine beetle fire cycle. And Ken, I'll let him dive into that more because he might know a little bit about Canmore.
Yeah, that's where you're joining us from, isn't it?
That's where I'm living right now.
Okay.
Is in Canmore. And fortunately enough, I did have a chat with Caitlin Miller, who's the manager in charge of looking after the fuel management strategy and fire guarding around Canmore here. And they do have a plan. They're going to implement it this winter. It's quite extensive. It looks like it's going to be a fairly good program from what I've seen. I haven't had a chance to look at it completely, and I certainly haven't had a chance to walk in the bush, which I plan on doing. But as I mentioned to her, there's different strategies that can be used. And one of them Emile touched on, and that's a partial harvest. And again, it depends on the ecosystem, depends on stand structure. And as far as Banff goes, I have not had a chance to talk to anybody there, but I assume they're doing a fair amount of work considering what happened in Jasper, because I believe the Premier of Alberta has made it a priority for many of the small communities and has made funding available to create fire guards around their communities to make them safe and not have them burn like Jasper.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine, obviously, this Jasper fire has been a wake-up call for a lot of people and also to the general public, right? I mean, like, it's just, I want to take a moment to recognize that there was a firefighter killed in Jasper through this, and obviously that's a great tragedy, but the evacuation of Jasper, as has almost become the norm in Alberta, though we'll not ever take it for granted, was remarkably well executed. To think of the number of people, more than 25,000 people evacuated without incident, relatively speaking. You imagine that happening in Banff. You imagine that happening in a more populated area. And of course, the potential for a disaster exists. And folks are starting to wonder, like, what's our game plan moving forward? How are we learning from all of this? I'd be curious for your take on climate change as well. You have mentioned it, and I'm seeing a trend here in our live chat. Ken says, pine beetles do play a factor, of course, as part of forestry management. There's no denying, though, that climate change also plays a factor. I did hear you mention it, Ken, our guest, but what did the two of you see with regard to changes in the forest? I'll note that climate change ebbs and flows, and of course some of these trends are measured over decades or over hundreds or even thousands of years. But did the two of you see evidence that climate change was having an impact on these forests that you worked for many years?
Yeah, personally, Emile and I looked at many of the stuff, and Emile with his background in the mountain pine beetle. Really, the change that we've seen is warmer winters. Therefore, there's no beetle kill. It allows to reproduce in the springtime, and it just goes to epidemic stages. Is in relation to other components, we've seen the changes of ecosystems going from a wet, cold soils to much warmer soils because we have warmer summers, warmer winters. We have more moisture components within the land base. So all that is climate change. But I think we have to recognize that climate change has been around for a billion years. We weren't around in the ice age or were the dinosaurs. Things happened then. Yes, humans have contributed to this climate change where you've got severe conditions happening more frequently, not just periodically, because some of the weather we had seen in Jasper, we saw in the 80s, but it got cool again. Then it's gotten hot again. So, I would suggest that climate change has had a bearing in what's happening in the forests, particularly with warmer winters, drier summers. All of that's playing a part in these fires, the beetles, and the ecosystems as a whole.
We've got Denis here in the live chat, and I want to ask the two of you to, as the late Jim Prentice invited us all to do, look in the mirror here. Denis says the logging industry is reforesting with monoculture forests. I've heard some experts say that that's contributing to the pine beetle problem. Emile, for the benefit of those that are listening to the podcast, you immediately started shaking your head. Take us into it.
Okay, that is an old, correct, but a little bit misleading. It is complex. It's not quite as simple as just plant pure pine. But yes, that does occur in too many stands. There's also different classes of seed you can get. You can get wild seed collections, which I've done for years. Ken's done them for years as well. We just collected some like 17 years worth of wild seed years ago. There's also genetically improved seeds, and I'm going to improve or emphasize the improved part versus the modified, which also occurs in research. We do something called mixed bag planting, which means that we identify the ecosystem that was harvested, which was largely lodgepole pine clear cuts. Lodgepole pine does very well with clear cuts, and that's why fires work really well. Lodgepole pine is a pioneer species. So successionally, if you do a clear cut, you're going to get lodgepole pine over other species in most ecosystems that are dry. In others, you're going to get a spruce, balsam, Douglas fir mix. So we have been planting mixed bag for at least the last 20 years. Douglas fir, lodgepole pine, spruce, hybrid spruce, wild spruce, balsam, white pine, white bark pine at high elevation areas, which is another concern in Jasper because it's got a lot of unique, rare white bark pine ecosystems that are highly sensitive. Logging companies are shifting, but it is a politically forced plant pure pine agenda, and politicians, they only last 4 years. Forests that I've worked in have been over 3,500 years old on the coast. So there's, again, we need to teach our politicians to listen to the people. If they don't, we need to recycle them out of the system because they're damaging our ecosystems and are not helping anybody. And just coincidentally, Jasper, or Alberta's specialized municipalities, Fort McMurray, Slave Lake, Jasper, Waterton, they're the ones that had all the fires. So what are the managers doing in our specialized municipalities that makes it so easy for them to burn? It's a complex situation, and we were planting pure pine, but anybody that still does that, they need to check the ecosystems and what they're really doing because they don't have to do that. There are solutions based on the ecosystem.
Let me follow up on that, because I know Jasper's Mayor Richard Ireland had kind of a scathing bit of commentary for those that in his estimation are politicizing or over politicizing this disaster, and he made some pretty powerful comments, as a matter of fact, from Marmot Basin just a short time ago. He's and I want to quote him, and I'm referencing here reporting by Bob Covey and the team at Jasper Local. You can check out jasperlocal.com. They do an amazing job out there in the park. Richard Ireland, about a week ago, said, quote, "The present atmosphere of finger-pointing, blaming, and misinformation is beyond merely an annoying distraction. It delays healing," he said. "It introduces fresh wounds at a time when we need recovery and unity." And I have to believe that Jasper's mayor was referencing some of the way that this fire has been politicized in Ottawa with the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievre going back and forth. What's the difference? And maybe there is a big difference, but what's the difference between how the fire in Jasper, for example, and the fire in Fort McMurray? Fort McMurray is not a national park. Fort McMurray is not under the purvey of Parks Canada. Both of them, I don't know if I want to say they were caught off guard, but both of those municipalities overwhelmed by a fire that roared in hot and faster than everybody expected. Ken, is there a big difference between those two jurisdictions?
One's a national park, obviously, and the other one isn't. They still have responsibilities within their community, and outside those communities, the national park, it's federal government that's responsible for it. Outside Fort McMurray, it's provincial government that is responsible for it, and how they're managed is probably somewhat different. And I think the two fires hopefully have opened up some eyes to ensuring that these communities, if you're going to allow them to be out in the wilderness, then they've got to provide some sort of strategies around managing the resources outside of that. Fireproofing, whether it be doing some broadcast burning, some logging. In the provincial land base, they'll look at logging more than they will any prescribed burns. Whereas in the national parks, they have that option of prescribed burning because they don't want logging. So those are kind of the differences between the two as I see it.
I want to, before I thank you both for your time, I was sort of ask you to give us, the audience, give the producer, John Hicks, and I something to think about as we move forward, a closing statement, so to speak, because people are going to continue to think about this. People understand that as spring comes and they're making their mountain plans, it seems to be a new consideration, not just in Canada, but people wonder about quote-unquote wildfire season. It's starting to influence people's plans on when and where they'll travel, how much time people are able to spend outdoors. What's something that you think that you'd like the general public to spend a little bit of time thinking about through these winter months, Emile?
There's a lot. Elections apparently are in the air this time of year. Apparently, right across Canada and British Columbia. What should people be thinking? When we met with mayor and council in Jasper, and it's not finger pointing, it's you got to recognize there's a problem before you can start healing from it, and you have to admit to what those problems are. And if administration at any level, all the way up from municipal right through provincial parks, people that have authorities, right up to the federal people that we're supposed to be electing, if they're the ones that are here to help us, then instead of just listening to a select group of their experts, they need to look at a broader perspective and bring in people that get their hands dirty, not just the experts and the academics, but they need to look at, if I'm going to a park, does this park have an emergency exit plan? Jasper didn't. I couldn't find one, and I was trained federally and had 8 years experience with emergency plans, spent some time in Hawaii, fortunately, learning about their emergency plans. And Jasper didn't have that. You can go to their website and you get a 2-page, here's your emergency plan, fill it in and give it to a friend, and there you go. You need to check your surroundings, where you're going to go. Beautiful places, and you want to get away from the intensity of cities, because forests are where you go to relax. And if you can't have some confidence that those forests are set up in a way that's going to help you relax and have peace of mind, You need to speak out and talk to those that are administering and managing them, right down to the mayor and councils who invited us to, as two foresters who respectfully came in to offer some information, advice to Jasper. And we were asked, what do two foresters think you have to offer us in Jasper? We have our own experts. You can leave now. So they didn't even want to be receptive to what we offered, and neither did Parks Canada. Superintendent wouldn't even meet up with us, and we wrote letters to Trudeau, to other ministers, not just McKenna. They wouldn't even help us meet up with those that do the administration and management. So I guess the message is, if you're going to be spending time in the parks, look after yourself, because that's what got everybody out of Jasper safely this time.
All right, Ken, last word for now to you.
My last word is, what are they going to do with the area that's been burned? Have a thought about that, because I think there's an opportunity here, as Emile mentioned earlier, and there's photographs from the 1910s and that era where you have grasslands. Maybe it's time to rethink about how that valley that's been burnt can come back into a complex, nice, used, what can I say? You can have a variety of ecosystems and looks. So it helps wildlife, it helps ecosystems, and it allows people to see a diversity. And that's really kind of what I'm thinking about, that maybe they can put some food for thought in towards doing that in the future for this particular case and in other cases as well.
That's Ken Hodges and Emile Béjean, the co-authors of a series of letters back in 2017 to the federal government about what they warned of, a devastating wildfire in Jasper National Park. Of course, that manifested itself. That happened, I don't have to tell you, in July of 2024. Gentlemen, thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. You can let us know what you think about that interview to talk at ryanjesperson.com. Obviously, this is another opinion. These are two individuals speaking based on their professional experience, 40 years each of them in the forests as professional foresters. I saw a comment in here. Denis in the live chat said, well, if you would have seen, he said, around a lot of the campgrounds in Jasper, he said there was a lot of clear cutting happening. Obviously, they were trying to make that happen. I want to reference again our episode on July 30th of this year. Kind of a comprehensive episode. We spoke to a number of different experts, including Dr. Mike Flanagan, as mentioned, but also the chief of the Parkland County Fire Department. That's Brian Cornforth, who joined us. Fascinating story from Brian, who talked about his family's personal connection to the area. He talks about his own family members, his mom evacuating the church that he was baptized in, burning, his family home impacted by the wildfire. I mean, this was really personal for Brian, and he talked to us as well about the efforts that he and the crew that he was in charge of, the steps that they immediately took at the Jasper Park Lodge. Remember this at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, and we asked him, like, what were the first things that you did as this fire's roaring in and the wind is whipping and this fire, of course, as we heard from weather experts as well. Kyle Brattain joined us. We do as much as we can, obviously, Real Talkers, to get a wide breadth of opinions, of expert opinions on the show. Kyle Brattain talked about how this Jasper wildfire was actually creating its own weather patterns and creating its own wind. But you remember Chief Cornforth talking to us. He said the first two things that they did when they got to the Jasper Park Lodge, and you have to think, this isn't like protecting a hotel. It's not like one standing building. It's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of structures, many of them heritage, most of them heritage structures, log cabins, that type of a thing. He said they got sprinklers on as many as they could, and then he said they got the mowers out, and they started cutting down the grasses and the brush around these buildings as quickly as they could. I got this visual of firefighters in bunker gear riding mowers, trying to get this stuff done, operating hand tools and that type of a thing. And it was also just a bit of a reminder and a wake-up call of how we can all maintain our own properties.
Oh, for sure.
Not just in rural areas, but a lot of clearing, a lot of that stuff that acts as tinder around the structures is huge, of course.
And I don't want to blame anyone, but I think that's something they'll be doing from now on. Like my first thought was, why wasn't the grass as short as it could be in the days before when the fire, when we were on kind of high alert that this was happening. And I don't want to blame anyone, but I'm sure that's something that they'll be taking, like our guest said, into account moving forward, is every step they can to make sure that fire could not spread. But I think another sad thing about that interview was him talking about how the firefighters knew their own homes, some of them were burning as they were trying to save hotels and businesses. That was just heart-wrenching.
I know, right? It's hard to imagine. I want to reference Sylvia's question as well. She wonders if we're planning a panel with the Jasper Mayor and Parks Canada on this topic. She says, pretty please. Sylvia, we're in constant contact with experts, of course. I want to reference our August 29th interview with Jasper's Mayor Richard Ireland, who I'm a huge fan of. This guy has the biggest heart for his community, and I think has done a remarkable job. I think that his comments were fair about the politicization of this. So again, that's August 29th. We talked to Richard Ireland. I'll let you know that we do have a standing interview request in with Parks Canada. To this point, it's been declined, but that's we'll do our best. And of course, a show like this never takes no for an answer. We still ask and ask and ask, and we'd love to get them on the show. We want to get you a number of as many credible opinions as possible. So you can form your opinion and better understand the issues that are at play here. I try to think, though, you got to also imagine, like, it's so easy for those of us that are sitting in armchairs to talk about. I mean, like, for Pierre Poilievre to talk about how the Liberal government blew the firefight and this, that, and the other. Like, what the fuck does Pierre Poilievre know about firefighting? Absolutely nothing. And I have to guess that he's probably doing whatever he can to take the heat and attention off his alleged implications and some of the Indian influence on some of the acts of violence that have been carried out in Canada per the RCMP. That's another story that we're keeping an eye on. But you remember how fast this Jasper fire roared in.
Oh, it's crazy.
Like, even the best experts in the country were looking at this and figuring that they had 4 to 5 days before that fire hit, and before they knew it, in a matter of hours, it had reached the town. Like, even the smartest, most experienced people in this country,
and we've had them on,
that sees its fair share of wildfires, we're blown back on their heels a little bit at how fast that arrived. I think if we say, well, why weren't they cutting those grasses down? I mean, like, if you've been out to Jasper, I mean,
there was so much other stuff.
Where are you going to start?
That's why I wasn't trying to blame anyone.
I know
there
you're
was
not.
So many other things they were doing, but hearing some of those experts, the ones we've had on, especially describing, because it's hard to think when you see a picture of a wildfire, what it actually looks like up close. But if you could think of something meters and meters and meters high, literally engulfing and tearing through big areas in like seconds. We're talking about, you turn around, you look at it, you turn back, and in 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds, it's eaten like enormous plots of land. It's unfathomable. I've never seen it. So big ups to and props to all those firefighters. And again, who were fighting these fires as they were being told, hey, it's moved onto your property.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, it's amazing.
I don't think, unless you've walked a mile in those boots, that you can understand the emotional impact of knowing that your place is gone.
But you put it in the
place is burning,
back of your mind and just do your job.
And just do your job. Like, to be able to separate yourself like that, I can't even imagine. Sylvia's got a question, says, if Jasper doesn't look like it did before, will people still go there to visit?
Well,
hey, listen,
they are already. So.
Number one, I guarantee that they will. And number two, we just want to encourage people. This is the time when Jasper's businesses are back, and of course summer is like their busiest season, but there are some things we're going to talk to you a little bit later in this episode about some stuff that's going on right now. And I just think that there's already evidence. You see these really powerful photos, some of the best nature photographers. My Instagram is just, I follow like nature photographers, scuba photographers, and golf accounts. That's pretty much my Instagram. And a lot of the photographers that are out in Jasper right now are getting these incredible images of, like, I saw one just yesterday of a grizzly bear that was navigating its way through an area that had been burned, but like the contrast of that of the new life and the life returning, the wildlife returning, was so powerful. And if you've been, like, I remember I tell you about this hike that my buddies and I went on. It was a long time ago. I think it was 2012, hiked the Moose River route, which circumvents Mount Robson. But there are two different areas on that route. It's about 90 kilometers. We turned it into 120 with a wrong turn, but it's about 90 kilometers through, and there's two different areas that have burned at two different times. And so one of them was more recent, one of them was longer. And to be able to see how quickly these forests bounce back is remarkable. You see, like, the deadfall and kind of that burn zone, whatever you'd call it, but then there's a lot of green, and there's a lot of new trees popping up. And it's actually I think, well, it's not a metaphor.
It is a silver
real life,
lining, but I guess if you could call it that. Yeah.
It's good to see. I want to get to some of your feedback. We ask for it all the time, and when you provide it, we want to make sure we get to it. And we've got two really, really great emails here, including one from Cheryl, who wrote in after our conversation yesterday with Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond. They talked about heavy drinking. We were talking about Sober October and that initiative, and they've got a powerful story. Mike himself spent a period of time about 15 years ago on the street in Vancouver's downtown east side. His drinking took him to a point where he lost his career, basically. He lost his family. He lost his home. And now he and Maureen, his life partner, also co-authoring a book called You Don't Have to Quit, a fascinating conversation on how to have conversations about alcohol with people that you love. If you missed that episode, I want you to check it out. But Cheryl wrote something in really, really powerful. And Marianne wrote in about our conversations about equity in education, an amazing roundtable last week that Real Talk was proud to host it. And Marianne writes in, you want to talk about lived experience. She's been teaching for 34 years. And so we want to get to her email. But first, I want to remind you about something that's happening on Saturday. I'm going to be there, and I would love for you to join me if you're tuning in from Edmonton, Calgary, or Kelowna. GEDfest is coming up this weekend. Of course, the GED, the GED there is Gordon Edgar Downey, a beloved Canadian, of course, the front man, the brilliance behind the Tragically Hip. The 7th annual GEDfest goes this weekend. That's Saturday on October 19th in Edmonton at Midway Music Hall. You can find it at the Palace Theatre in Calgary and find the details for Kelowna's event at gedfest.ca. It's a rock and roll show with 3 of Canada's best Tragically Hip cover bands. In Edmonton, it's Hypnotical. They're going to be rocking the house. And of course, we got Trickle Down playing in Calgary. They're hoping to raise $250,000 for cancer charities across Western Canada. Here in Edmonton, we're going to be raising money for the Alberta Cancer Foundation and the Ben Stelter Foundation. It's going to be an evening of rock and roll. It's going to be an evening of playing the hits. And of course, it's going to be an evening of doing some good. I would love to see you at GEDfest this Saturday. That's October 19th. You can get your tickets at gedfest.ca. I want to give a shout out to our friends at California Closets. They are the best in the business at what they do. That is custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. If it's good enough for Stuart Skinner, the Edmonton Oilers goaltender who got that elusive first victory last night, an OT winner against the Philadelphia Flyers. California Closets can work for you too. I love their commercial with Stu, where he talks about how California Closets can work with any budget. They can custom design to your space, of course, your budget, and it all comes with the confidence of a lifetime guarantee. You can check out the client testimonials and request your free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. All right. Pretty powerful stuff yesterday from Maureen Palmer and Mike Pond. They're the co-authors of a new book called You Don't Have to Quit. And Mike sharing his personal story on what do they call it again? Alcohol use disorder. We learned a lot about the words that they are preferred and the phrases that we're not really using anymore. Mike explained to us why people, he's a psychotherapist, by the way. He helps people as a harm reduction psychotherapist, which makes his story that much more compelling, I think. But they don't prefer the word alcoholic. They don't use words like relapse or falling off the wagon. And I want to get to what Cheryl wrote in here. But first, if you missed that episode, here's a brief snippet. This is Mike Pond on Real Talk.
It might be once or twice a year, and it might last an evening, and then I'm done, right? But I had 5.5 years sobriety when I first sobered up in 2009, and we were so focused on rebuilding my life, and then rebuilding my practice and establishing that, and just getting back into the functioning, overall functioning in life in general, And then something happened. It was around Christmas time, and it was a family-related issue. And I decided to drink again. And as I said, that was the first time in 5.5 years. And so since then, there are these episodes, right, of drinking that I have. And I have a lot of insight into why it happens and what's going on for me. That's what I do for a living. I'm a psychotherapist, so I can kind of analyze what's going on in my own mind. But I have the episodes and then they're over and they're short-lived. And at first, tremendous shame and guilt. And, the first episode was when we were filming. We just started filming the documentary. And because we were in these settings, right, like the downtown east side, or going back to Penticton in my hometown and around my home and my offices, and doing the filming and take after take after take. And we didn't realize at the time how much that was affecting me, how much that was triggering and activating a lot of unpleasant memories and experiences. And that's when I opened the fridge and there was, a bottle of Chardonnay in the fridge. And there always was. Like, it was never an issue for me because Maureen would drink socially. But that night I drank it. So that became a part of, my own personal and professional search for evidence-based treatments and challenging the existing kind of system of the abstinence-only, mostly 12-step model.
So that's Mike Pond on our October 15th episode of Real Talk. It prompted Cheryl to write in to talk at RyanJesperson.com. She says, I was so disappointed to miss the live show of Mike and Maureen on addiction recovery. Substance and process addictions are matters that me and my family have faced and continue to grapple with. Cheryl says, I want to start with affirming my belief in that 12-step program of recovery from addiction. You heard Mike just mention it there at the end of the clip. Cheryl says, as a spiritual solution, its efficacy changes lives for those who need it and those who follow it. I speak from personal experience as one who has recovered from a process addiction. I've been restored to sanity, and I haven't replaced one addiction for another, as is common in the rooms. I've found a solution that works in all of my affairs, which is amazing, Cheryl. She says, but I also do, though, support some of Mike's views. In my limited experience, I've seen two primary problems with the 12-step programs today. These 12-step programs are talking about like Alcoholics Anonymous and the like. Cheryl says the first problem is that the 12-step program is not being passed along effectively. There's many people in the rooms who are helping others while they themselves are still struggling, giving out of what they don't have. And there are many people in the rooms who have a big problem, but they may not be an addict. Plus, there's a whole bunch of individuals who don't really want to follow the 12-step program. They want abstinence, not recovery. They want good outcomes for them, but not a new way of living. They want social connection, but not accountability. I'll follow what I like, but don't tell me what to do, so to speak. As a result, the 12-step program is struggling with weak recovery, not because it doesn't work, but because the participants aren't working it. The second problem is that the 12-step program was never intended to be used as a medical remedy. In fact, the Traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, written in 1955 to keep the integrity of the program intact, warned against partnering with outside organizations, including hospitals and medical professionals, and warned against mixing the 12-step program with outside money, warned against promoting the program. Attraction, not promotion. But all of a sudden now, hospitals and medical professionals and courtrooms are mandating it? That's not going to work. What occurred at the time of the second publication of the Big Book of AA was that the U.S. medical health and health industry took notice of how many alcoholics were recovering, and they decided to get in on the action. Treatment centers run by government agencies or private not-for-profits, especially for-profit organizations, brought in outside matters into the 12-step program, including money. The programs are expensive, but don't worry if you're not rich. We can lobby the government for more taxpayer money, or your employment benefits can pay us. The very thing that we are cautioned to avoid for fear of losing the integrity of the solution has happened. Furthermore, the treatment centers watered down this solution, offering it as just a part of other human aid solutions. The whole premise of the 12-step program is that human aid solutions don't work for those of us who are seemingly hopeless. Many of us had done years of therapy, taken personal development courses, spent money on all kinds of programs and services, faced our traumas, had even tried medical options, all of which failed us. Those who were beyond human aid. The 12-step program was our only solution. And that's been true for me, says Sheryl. So mixing this into a part of the government or organizational or therapeutic treatment program just wouldn't work, and it's proven to be true. All of this to say, I agree with Mike and Maureen on the problem of medical professionals recommending or using 12-step programs. Their data is probably accurate, just proving what the founding alcoholics already knew and warned against. I have no opinion on Mike's position about evidence-based addiction solutions. I'm not a professional, and if his story is true for him, then it's valid as his lived experience. I often say to others that I'm helping those who have addictions like mine. And if something other than this 12-step program works for you, do that, please. The program is simple, but not easy. Find a softer, easier way if that works. She says, I support solutions to addiction regardless of whether it mirrors my story or not. Isn't that the whole point? Find recovery any way that works. That is the only real path to freedom and peace. And then she signs off for today, Sheryl. I thought that was really good.
Yeah,
and this, this is something that if you check out our short on YouTube from yesterday or a reel on Instagram or TikTok for that matter, we referenced that, a statistic that Maureen Palmer put in front of us. She's an award-winning journalist. She's the other half of that co-author duo. And she basically says, 3 out of 10 Americans. So 30% of adult Americans drink too much, which I recognize people automatically pounce and say, well, how do you quantify too much? What's too much? But 30% of adult Americans drink too much, but 90% of those are not dependent, which was an interesting statistic. We tacked onto that, and 100% of people likely don't want to talk about their drinking.
No, and I think this is such a, addiction and dependency. It's such a spectrum, right? We could say they're not dependent, but I mean, if those drinks are coming, why are you having those drinks? Are you celebrating a lot? Like, is it that time of year? Or are you using it to de-stress, to calm down, to get through, like we were talking yesterday, Thanksgiving dinner with Aunt Karen or whoever? I think that's what we need to look into more. But that was a great email. But I think yesterday, just talking about that as well, it's just, I think we need to think more about why we do things instead of like, should I or should I not be doing this, right? Yeah. Should I be having this many drinks? Is it too many? Rather, we should be asking, why am I having these many drinks? Should I incorporate some other things? Should I go to yoga? Should I meditate? Should I go to the gym? Should I eat better? Should I drink more water? Should I spend more time with friends instead of at home alone? Whatever you're doing, watching hockey, TV, drinking. I think the why is more important than the just, sticking to a number and saying, I'm going to drink this much or I shouldn't drink this much, right? Because, it all depends why you're doing it. If you're doing it to mask pain and give yourself, to self-medicate, it's probably always for the wrong reason, right?
Yeah, and then there's some folks in the chat right now that are saying, like, not everything's a wild bullet. I think it was Banff Fashions that said sometimes
that was a great comment.
Sometimes people just want to drink, and that's fair too. Like, I sort of had cards on the table coming into that episode, the October 15th episode myself, being like, for me, I understand that for some people they go, well, I'm gonna go stone sober. Like that's the only thing that works for me. And for some people, that is absolutely the only thing that works for you. I have a personal friend. I won't give any identifying details, but he cannot have a sip. Like if he has a sip, everything unravels and it's a disaster, and it's proven itself to be a disaster several times. And so that's what works for him. For others, that's not what works. And I don't think that the goal of this is to demonize anybody. I saw somebody yesterday though on Facebook, unrelated to our episode. She got like a keychain for her first 6 months of sobriety. Awesome. And the amount of support, it's absolutely fantastic. And the support that I saw in her comments was really, really incredible.
But everyone's story is different. And I really liked how yesterday, I know some people are going to go back now, can see people in the chat already who may have missed yesterday. Yesterday was a slow day after Thanksgiving. A lot of people, even today, the traffic was like so much worse when I was coming to work. But anyways, I know some people are going to have a problem with it, but I I really believe that. I think the journey of addiction, dependency, alcoholism, drug addiction, it's different for everyone. And it's not just like everyone needs to stop cold turkey. I feel like that's this outdated way of saying we need to make changes. You know, I think everyone can use some weaning. And I think there are people out there who can go to recovery, who can go to AA, who can go to addiction specialists and come out on the other side and be like Mike, where, hey, it's Christmas, I'm going to have a glass of wine, and not fall into a spiral. But I agree. I do know those people just like you who I'm totally respectful of it. I don't have a drink around them because I know they have one sip of whiskey and it turns into a banger night and they're doing cocaine and it's just it's a
next thing you know
it's a hurricane.
You know, DUI, fist through the drywall, not showing up to work.
100%.
You know what I mean? So 100%. Hey, advertising works, by the way. You said people that want to be like Mike, and all of a sudden I start getting the whole advertising works. If you want to advertise on Real Talk, media at ryanjesperson.com. Also had a great conversation on October 8th on what inclusive ed actually looks like from the great state of Illinois. We had Dr. Kate Zisser joining us alongside Amber Mack, who is the CEO of a nonprofit called Grit, and a mom, Tiffany Hansen, who's got twins. One of her twins, this is wild, two little girls, beautiful little girls. One of them has been expelled 7 times from childcare centers. The other twin, totally fine. No behavior issues whatsoever, but there's an epidemic of early childhood expulsion. And we got into it. We started talking about what inclusive classrooms look like and what the proper makeup for classrooms should be. And of course, we expect to hear from real talkers with lived experience. I see some educators in our live chat right now. Shout out to Jillian and others. This is an email from Marianne, who wrote into talk@ryanjesperson.com. She says, your episode on the struggles faced in classrooms has really struck a chord. She says, my heart and brain are pulled in 3 different directions. I like how she lays this out. She says, direction number 1, I've been teaching for 34 years. She says, I'm newly retired. Congratulations, Marianne. But I'm still very familiar with all the struggles in an inclusive classroom. They're a challenge without a doubt. However, classrooms that reflect the diversity of our community at large enhance everyone's education. I remember a colleague reading an essay from a student during a staff meeting. A neurotypical student wrote about how sharing a classroom with an autistic student had taught her very valuable lessons and skills that would stay with her for her entire life. And at the same time, that autistic student, a valuable member of our community, using many skills that he learned from being with an entire classroom, not being segregated, right? Inclusive ed enhances the learning of everyone in the classroom. Direction 2, think about small rural schools that don't have the numbers to be able to offer specialized programs or enough educational assistants or EAs to meet everybody's needs. With the current funding formula based on per pupil, students with smaller, or schools rather, with smaller enrollment don't have the same amount of funding, but they face the same variance of needs in the classroom. It means tough decisions are being made. Funding is usually earmarked for severe needs, and that's where extra supports are focused. And then the students with behavioral challenges are usually juggled with these specialized assistants when they can be, but otherwise they're just left for a classroom teacher to handle. Now, teachers are professionals. They read reports. They create programs to meet these needs, but simple math lets you know that they're outnumbered. That doesn't mean they're less empathetic or less professionally developed to do this well. It just means that with the same broad scope of needs, but fewer funds, well, it comes with a cost. And some of these students aren't adequately supported, and the entire classroom feels the effects. And the third direction I'm being pulled in, says Marianne, is that my nephew has been through great trauma in his life, and his mom accesses therapy and is in constant contact with his educational team. Communication constant on both sides. Everything's being done correctly, but unfortunately, these little trauma brains in these little bodies are very unpredictable. Some days are great, others present great challenges. And on these challenging days, the little guy may be removed from his cohort or be in the office or even be sent home. And I can tell that it's starting to affect his self-esteem. Tiffany said the same thing about her daughter, 4 years old. It's starting to affect her self-esteem, as it would. Back to Marianne. Says, at 8 years old, he told me the other day that he hopes he can be expelled so he can have different people around him. That made my heart hurt. Little humans with these experiences do not choose to behave this way. Trauma has changed the way that their brains work, and they can't control it. He's bright. He's articulate. He's empathetic when he's not dysregulated. And as somebody who loves him, I want him to be successful and included. So here I am seeing a variety of perspectives on the same issue. Who's to blame? The kids, the parents, the teachers, the system? Well, the system must reflect the people that it serves. And currently there's some flaws. Funding is not reflecting the needs that are out there. Your listeners have shared stories of success in response to this discussion, but all schools should be able to have success in this day and age. With the current provincial funding model, some schools cannot possibly meet everybody's needs and find success on all levels. Schools have to have success on provincial exam results as well as success with individualized programs. Something's got to give, and right now, everything is giving. That's a great line. Everybody's feeling the lack of resolve, the lack of direction, and unfortunately, that needs to be shown with funding and policy decisions. Public education, she has in all caps, needs to be funded well and with equity. My small rural school can't pick and choose who's in their classrooms, but we must meet every student at those doors at the beginning of the year. The privilege of hand-picking your clientele, little shot at private schools, is not equitable through the province. And until that equity is addressed, public funds must be distributed to those schools delivering ed to all students that show up, not just those that meet a predetermined exclusive criteria. Public funds should be used for public schools, full stop. Marianne says, I wasn't able to get out to Jasper, by the way, for Thanksgiving, but I'm planning on getting out there as soon as I can. Keep on keeping it real. That from Marianne to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Shout out, you read these emails. I try my best to reflect the passion that these are written with and the purpose. And I think that Marianne, it's so obvious where she's coming from on that. I want to give a shout out to all the educators, all the parents, all the teachers, the administrators, and even some of the politicians that are doing their job right, that are doing what they were elected to do. And let's ensure that we keep holding the rest of their feet to the fire. That's what this show has the ability to do. And you can always have your say by sending us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com or leaving a comment on any of our episodes. Leaving comments on YouTube helps those episodes grow. And, of course, we appreciate everybody that shares those episodes, too. Well, Marianne says that she's going to get out to Jasper as soon as she can, and I think that holds true for a whole lot of us. Once a week, every Wednesday, courtesy of our wonderful friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to remind you about the crown jewel of the Canadian Rockies. That is Jasper National Park, and the chances you have to make your own Jasper memories. And I want to remind you right now about the Jasper Dark Sky Festival, which is coming up. The one that you've been eagerly awaiting is going to look a little bit different this year with limited programming scheduled, but don't worry. The full festival is going to make an incredible return in 2025 to celebrate its 15th anniversary. Now, while they won't be gathering per usual, like the sort of tradition would suggest, your dark sky adventure does not have to wait. Jasper National Park is the second largest dark sky preserve in the world, and the opportunities for stargazing are endless. October is the perfect time for stargazing and the perfect time to seek out new experiences. And if the trends hold true over these past few days, there's a good chance you're going to catch a glimpse of the Northern Lights as well. There's a few different events that I want to make sure that you have on your radar. Number one, Johnny's showing us a photo of us there if you're watching on YouTube, the Symphony Under the Stars at the Fairmont Jasper Park. Look at that venue. Incredible. You got the.
I want to be there right now.
I know.
I
Really.
need that.
Just
I need this.
Fold everything up and let's get out on Highway 16. Let's get out there. They've got these beautiful Adirondack chairs set up. They got a stage right in front of Lac Beauvert. You got the mountain vista behind you. Stunning. There's a few tickets left, but this is guaranteed to sell out. It always does. So that's the Symphony Under the Stars at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. That's this Saturday, October 19th. And then they've also got on the property the Jasper Planetarium. They offer tours all month long. We absolutely love this as a family. Our 9-year-old Wyatt is like eyes wide when he walks into there, and they'll have everything all set up. The learning opportunities are amazing. I don't care if you're 9 or 99. There's going to be something there that you're going to learn, something that will absolutely rock your world. They've also got the fireside chat with warrior women going on, and this is Matricia Bauer and the team out there have turned this into an absolutely must-experience moment. That's the fireside chat with warrior women. You can learn more on the website we're going to tell you about. You can also link to it in the show notes on the podcast or on YouTube. And, Johnny, they've got the Starry Night Improv Show, which is super cool as well. You can check it out at jasperdarksky.travel. This is one show for the entire family, so you can bring the kids. Everybody's going to have a good time. And then they have one show that's, as we say in our household, just for the mommies and the daddies. They've got an adult.
You mean expletives?
Wow, I don't know what it was. Hey, you got to. I don't know if it's dirty, but let's just say that they're going to explore the galaxy of comedy. How's that?
That's great.
So they do have the 18+ adult show. The doors open at 7:00 for that with the Jasper Theater Company. They do such a good job. They are wildly entertaining. I don't know why my face hurts from smiling right now. I think it's just because I'm thinking of my own Jasper Dark Sky Festival memories. For more information, you can check out jasperdarksky.travel. And when you're out there, whether it's shots of the Aurora Borealis or Symphony Under the Stars, or maybe you're just touring around town, having a beer at the Jasper Brewing Company, or having your favorite meal, wherever it is, at your favorite Jasper restaurant, we'd love to see your photos. If you're posting on Instagram or Twitter, make sure you use the hashtags MyJasper and Real Talk RJ, and we would love to feature your photos in an upcoming episode of MyJasper Memories, which is presented weekly here on Real Talk from the amazing team at Tourism Jasper.
Man, those Northern Light photos are crazy.
Aren't they amazing?
I missed out. I didn't see any of this the other day. Everyone was like, yeah.
It's
woke up the next day. I'm like, I missed out.
Well, you're going to bed too early, pal.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe you're spending. Here's the thing: as we talk about mental health, you're doing all the right things.
Yeah.
Whereas I just scroll on my phone 24 hours a day, and so when the Aurora Borealis is out in downtown urban centers, I know to jump outside. I had that experience just the other day, and everybody was posting. It seemed like everybody was posting. Check out our episode, our October 15th episode, which was Positive Reflections by Kubi Renewable Energy, and we showed from Leslie and from Jeff, real talkers who had shared their Northern Lights, their Aurora Borealis photos with us, and Jeff's incredible. He was showing like with the Walter Dale Bridge in downtown Edmonton. So I see this and I jumped out. I just opened the back door of our house. This never happens, man. There's like, first of all, we have like the big motion sensor lights, and then you've got the lights on the house, and then you've got the street lights, and it's just kind of, Jasper is this dark sky preserve. Our home is like the opposite in the city center. But even still,
this was just
I
insane.
Opened the back door. Look at this photo you're showing us on YouTube. This is Jeff Nash's photo that he shared.
How did I miss this?
Just amazing.
Walter
but I
Dale
stepped
Bridge.
right outside right outside the back of our house, and the Northern Lights were just dancing. And I get that our rural listeners are going to see this more frequently, but to be in the heart of the city and to see the Aurora Borealis is something really, really special. Do you subscribe to any of the Aurora Watch accounts? You can do that,
I guess I should now.
If you're on Twitter, they got
next time this happens, Real Talkers, we've got a drone now.
Oh, we do have a drone.
That's
We're
immediately what I thought when I saw this. I was like, what a failed opportunity for us to have our own viz that we own of the Northern Lights over the Walter Dale Bridge to use on Real Talk. So I failed you, but I'll come through next time.
We don't expect you on the clock 24 hours a day.
Well, I'm going to carry that drone around from
this
now
this
on.
may have been one of our more frivolous purchases as an entity, was the drone that we just bought. But
not at all.
But I'm thinking we do our Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic, which we'll have an announcement on that coming up. We're meeting with organizers. That'll be in early 2025, an annual fundraiser that we're proud to. It's like one of the best days of the year out in St. Albert. We've got a Real Talk Golf Classic. So I think this drone is going to see a lot of action.
It's also like, when things happen, protests, whatever, we want to kind of be, we want to have our own, viz of everything that's going on, everything current. So we'll be out there. You'll be seeing Johnny on the spot. We've got Johnny on a rooftop.
Vamp wonders, does going to the Athabee in the wedding tux and partying count as a MyJasper memory? What do you think, Vamp?
The Athabee is incredible.
Obviously, the Athabee is. I can't wait to get back. Some of my best moments have happened on the dance floor.
My best night ever in Jasper was at the Athabee. I used to have when Travis Barker and DJ AM, if for those of you in the chat who are that old, used to have their drum and DJ. Me and my friend Trip West, we had kind of the same thing. We went to the Athabee. We'd never been there before. I know people are, well, you've never been there. what an incredible evening. We felt like rock stars up there. The community out in Jasper, just the way people get together and dance to every song, whether they know it or not. It's just an amazing time.
James says, I'm now wondering why Real Talk doesn't have a sports style wire cam in the studio for action shots.
Hey, you never know.
Is the wire cam the one that you see at football games where it like goes zzz and it goes across? Yeah. So here's the thing, James. I don't need you planting any more seeds in Johnny's brain. We're already running.
We were talking about this yesterday.
What other independent talk show is running 7 cameras? We're running 7 cameras, and now we're going to have to go with 8 because James has come up with a
from the ceiling
great idea about another, because he's right. We do need that. But what we're going to have to do is if we install a wire cam, we're going to have to do like what Jay Onright does in Sports Center, where I'm going to have to get up and I do an interview here, and then I get up and then I walk over to another set, and then I go sit down there and read the emails.
Yeah, well,
so the wire cam could follow me.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 options here. Either these arms that you see around holding the cameras, we replace those with actual motion arms, or we hire a cameraman. But either of these things, I agree with the Real Talk audience, Ryan. I think we should upgrade.
Yeah. Oh, I know you do. I know you do. Jillian, who we know is a junior high school teacher, she's been on the show before, and we sure appreciate her reporting. This is real life, real talk from a junior high school teacher. Says it's weird that so many of you real talkers are surprised. Many schools, she says, have almost no EAs or counselors anymore. She says if you're a teacher with 6 kids with needs in a class of 30, you're on your own. She says, get this, one of my colleagues had to stop a lesson to counsel a parent that turned up in a mess. We are literally holding society together like police do. We are dealing with all the issues. That from Jillian. You can send us your thoughts to talk@ryanjesperson.com. As we wrap, I want to let you know what's coming up on tomorrow's episode. Tomorrow is actually nationally Conflict Resolution Day. Isn't that kind of interesting? So whether it's personal conflict, professional conflict, we're going to talk about politicians and everybody else. We got a roundtable you're not going to want to miss. Plus, a 14-year-old that's already given her first TED Talk. Lily Grace is going to join us from BC, a 14-year-old with a book out on mental health. And on Friday, the group chat roundtable returns to talk all things politics and home reno superstar Brian Baumler. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive